Hey everyone, and welcome back to Developer Soapbox. Today I want to show you how to use JRuby to connect to an Access database. And one nice thing about this tutorial is that it should actually work for any other type of database that you're having issues with connecting through JDBC driver. For most of the well-known databases like Oracle and MySQL and so on, JRuby should have pretty solid connectivity and examples on how to do that. For more obscure databases, like in this case Access, it does take a little bit more work. So here's a sample of how I started out, right? So if you want to connect to Access an Access database using Java or a JVM language, so you can access is the JDBC driver that you would be using or the library that you could be using. And here's how I started, right? So I'm requiring Java. This is my Ruby program. I'm requiring Java. And then here I would have my jar of where my you can access driver is, along with all of its dependencies. And basically you're just trying to load the driver class, and then here you're using the loaded driver to basically try to get a connection. And here is where I was getting stuck on. And basically no matter what I tried, I could not get this connection to recognize that my driver was loaded. I've read examples where it said, well, you're not using for name, class for name, but as you can see, I am doing that. And even to the point where if I iterate through the drivers, this would actually print out that the driver was in my drivers collection. So the driver was there, it just wasn't getting recognized. So it got to the point where I was pretty desperate. I started looking around the internet, and I did find this pretty insightful post that mentioned, sometimes when you're trying to work on these problems with non-Java JVM languages, it is better to cheat a little bit and use a little bit of Java. So just sprinkle a little bit of Java on just to try to solve the core problem. And that's what we're basically doing here. So we're not going to cheat too much, for all the purists out there. So basically all we're going to do is use Java just for the getting or connections piece. So instead of having to do all this stuff within our JRuby program, we're basically just going to write a very, very small Java class that returns a connection for us. So let's go ahead and let me show you how to do that. Here I have Eclipse open, and I'm just going to create a new Maven project. And go ahead and click next, and I'm just going to create this as an archetype quick start, just to have kind of a basic starting point. For my group ID, I'll call this my group, which is com.developer soapbox. My artifact ID, I'll call this JDBC utils, and click next or finish. And once you have your project, let's first go into our pom.xml, and let's do a few things in there. And to save you some time, I will copy and paste these in. And also I will put the URL to my blog post, which has all this information on there. So don't worry too much about, following and typing along. You can just go into my blog and copy and paste all this information. So the first thing is for properties. Let's go ahead and specify our Java version. Here I'm just going to use 1.8 just to stay compatible with most people out there. Second, let me put my dependencies, and for my dependency I just need one thing, which is the you can access JDBC driver, which is what we're going to use to connect to the Access database. And lastly, for my build section, I'm just putting in a plugin here in order to create a fat jar. So a fat jar is essentially just a jar with all of the dependencies required within the same jar. Next thing I can do is I don't need any tests, and I can see that there's some errors out there for the tests. I'm just going to delete that folder and then go into your main directory and delete that app.java class that comes along with the archetype. And let's create a new class, and I'll call this JDBC util, and click finish. And the only thing we're going to need is a single method that returns a connection. So this is going to be a public connection, and it's this one right here, the java.sql connection. And I'll just call this get connection. And to keep it dynamic, I'm just going to take in the URL for the database. And first thing we're gonna do is load the class. So I'm just gonna do a class for name. And for the you can access driver, this is the class name. So it's net you can access JDBC you can access driver. And then we're just gonna return the connection. So I'm gonna do driver manager, get connection, and pass that URL, which is our parameter for the method. And lastly, we do need to add some exception throwing here. So we're just gonna make the method throw back some exceptions if we hit those. And that's it. So after we have this, I can right click on my project, do run as, and Maven build. And I'm just gonna do a package and run. After your build process is complete, go into this target directory, right click, go to properties. And right here for the location, click on this little icon show in System Explorer. And it's gonna open where your jar is. And it's gonna be the second one here, the jar with dependencies. And I'm just gonna go ahead and delete all this other stuff, and I'm just gonna call it dependencies and put it into my the directory where my all my stuff is, all my program, my Ruby program, and my database. It doesn't have to be the same location if you specify since we're gonna specify the entire path, but I'm just gonna do it just to make it simple. Now we're back into our Ruby program. And first thing I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna require Java so we can use Java from within JRuby. And second thing is we just need the path to the dependencies file that we just created. So again, I'm just gonna right click, go to properties, copy that location, and put that there. And then we do need to invert these slashes just to escape it. And the name of my file is dependencies.jar. After you require that, let's go ahead and get our JDBC, a reference to our JDBC util class. So I'll call this variable JDBC util. And to tell JRuby that you want to use a JDBC class, you have to write Java and then : followed by the fully qualified class name with the package. Here's where it gets a little bit funky though. So instead of writing the package name as, com.developer soapbox, whatever, you do need to use Pascal case without the periods instead. So in this case, it would be com developer soapbox. And I think I called it, let's see here, JDBC utils, right? So I just copy that. And as you can see, there's no periods on here, right? And then : and then our actual class name, which is the JDBC util, and then .new in order to create a new instance of that class. Now that we have the reference to JDBC util, you can use it to create a connection. So I'm just gonna do connection equal to JDBC get connection, which is the method, and then just pass in the JDBC connect string. So for you can access, the general format is this. So it's JDBC : you can access, and then the path of the database. In this case, the database is in the same location as my dependency. So I'm just gonna borrow this from up here. And what I'm gonna be using is a simple access database. And it's just a database called database1, and it has a single table called people with currently 2 records in there. So you can see it just has one column called name, and it just have John and Jane in there. So let's use that database. So it's database1.accdb. After you have your connection, you can go ahead and do some statements. So let's do a statement, connection, create statement. And again, from here on, the only thing we needed the Java class for was to get that connection. From here on, we're just writing JDBC in JRuby like we would even if we hadn't created that Java class. So once I have my statement, I can do statement and it's execute update. And then basically let's insert a record in there. So just a DML for that. So let's do people. And we have one column called name, values, and let's do, and let me change this to double quotes so I can put a single quote in there. let's do Bill. Okay, so save this and let's run it. So if I open a console, I am already in the same directory as my script. So I can just do from here, I can do JRuby and my program.rb file. That's the name of my script. You can see that it executed, didn't give me any errors this time. And if we go into our Access database, we may have to refresh this. Let me close it and open it again. And there it is. There's a record we added, Bill, right? So now that we inserted a record, let's go ahead and let's read the records, right? So in order to do so, let's create a record set, and I'll use the same statement. Instead of having to create a new statement, I'll reuse this, but instead of doing execute update, let's do an execute query. So execute query, and then just select star from people. And once we have our record set, let's iterate through it. So while rs next do, and I'm just gonna print out, let's just print out each name, right? So record set get string and the name of the column. Oh, and it actually, instead of do, it did an autocomplete here and did document. So let me fix that, do, and let me run this again. And here you go. So you can see it did add Bill again since I didn't delete that insert, but you can see that it printed out everything. Something else that I did forget to do is go ahead and close your connection after you're done. And we could be done here, but let's do one other pretty cool thing here. So let's, why don't we put a REST API on top of this thing, right? So we have our database connectivity to access. Let's go ahead and do a Sinatra REST API on top of this. So very simple. I'm just going to do for selection of records, right? Just to show the records. So let's go ahead and install that gem. So gem install Sinatra. Once the gem is installed, let's go back here to our requires, and let's do require, and let's do Sinatra, right? Sinatra. And then I'm just going to wrap this whole thing in a get for, let's do people, and then do this whole thing. And I'll push that out, and let's save. And one change we do need to make is we do need to put, instead of printing our records, let's go ahead and put them all into an array and then convert that array into JSON. So I'm just going to do, let's call this people is equal to array.new to create a new instance of an array. And then instead of putting here, I'm just going to do people push, and then let's push a dictionary, right? So it would be name and push that into name. And then after we have that, just do, I'll do it down here. So it's the last thing, so it returns that. So people to JSON. And let's try to run that. So it says it's successful, and let's go to our port 4567 to see if that works. So if I open my browser, go to localhost 4567 and people. And there we go. So you can see that it printed out. Pretty awesome, right? So, if you like this video, please go ahead and hit that like button. If you'd like to receive notifications every time I release something new, please subscribe. Thank you. Have a great day.